Welcome everyone to the Massachusetts State Auditor's debate here in Greenfield, Massachusetts. My name is Ezra Bradkin and I'm going to be your moderator today. And so here's a little bit about what this process is going to look like. We're going to hear from our two candidates for State Auditor. We have Jed Stamas representing the Green Rainbow Party and Dan Fishman representing the Libertarian Party. And we will be taking questions from the audience, so if you have a question for one of these candidates at any point during the debate, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll find time to fit those in. But we're going to start off with some opening statements. So I'm going to ask the candidates to introduce themselves and describe your background and experience that qualifies you for the position, and then briefly state your position as it relates to your candidacy. We'll start with you, Dan.
Do you have any time that you want us to hit?
Let's do a minute for opening statements.
A minute for opening statements. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the Libertarian candidate for auditor. I want to audit the Massachusetts so much that my website is auditmassachusetts.com. You can find more about my position there. Fundamentally, I'm a computer scientist by trade, but before I became a computer scientist, I was a special education teacher. For the last 8 years, I've been writing software that measures efficacy of implementations in special education. How good is what we're doing achieving the results that we want? That's the sort of applications that I want to bring to auditing the state. The current auditor is supposed to be auditing every state agency once every 3 years. 375 agencies, 125 audits a year. She has complained that she cannot do it. She is not hitting that goal. And in fact, she filed legislation last year to try to lighten her load to say, certain agencies I should only audit whenever I see fit. That's not the way an auditor is supposed to work. And if agencies know that they're not going to get audited, like as an example, the state police, they have a scandal. Or a year ago, I called out the fact that the environmental police have not been audited in 10 years. Guess what? They have a payroll scandal that's just been announced as well. So, we can change that. I'm a computer scientist by trade. I'm going to automate a lot of the audits. You and I should be getting alerts that says, guess what? This person just worked 80 hours of overtime 3 weeks in a row. We can put that online, we can put that on a website. The people are supposed to represent the power source in our country. Let's give the people the information and then restore to them the power.
Thank you, Dan. And then we'll hear from Jed.
Jed Stamas, I'm the Green Rainbow candidate for State Auditor. And I'm here today representing the Green Rainbow Party. We have two other candidates running for state office. 2018, Jamie Guerin, she's here. She's running for treasurer, as well as Juan Sanchez, running for Secretary of the Commonwealth. The Green Rainbow Party is the Massachusetts state affiliate of the Green Party. We're called Green Rainbow because we merged with the Rainbow Coalition, which was founded by Mel King back in the 1970s when he was a state representative. And Mel King is a famous now African-American community activist who endorsed all three of our campaigns and recently had his 90th birthday that was attended by Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston. So just a little bit about myself. I have a degree in physics and astronomy, and after going to Haverford College, I worked on the Chandra X-ray telescope. That's a space telescope that's now in space. I worked on the calibration phase, so I'm very, very comfortable dealing with data, organizing data. Although I've never worked in the financial industry, I don't believe that's a requirement to be a politician or to be an auditor. And I have extensive mathematical experience, having taught physics and related topics in Massachusetts public schools for over 15 years. As Dan said, okay.
All right, thank you both. And thanks again to everybody who came out on such a rainy, nor'easter day to hear the positions of the candidates. So you'll notice that we don't have any candidates from either of the major parties here, Democrat or Republican. And
let's say old parties.
Old parties. And in the current position, we have a Democrat in the position. But I'd like to hear from each of the candidates. Auditing the books is not necessarily a partisan issue, but what is it about the party that you represent that is more qualified and more fitting to hold the next state office? We'll start with Jeff.
Okay. So the Green Rainbow Party, we differ from the Democrats, we differ from the Republicans, and the Libertarians. We strongly agree that there needs to be more transparency in state government. One thing that we take it one step further, and we would like to look at all of our state systems holistically and ask the question, are they meeting people's basic needs? And right now, we live in a state, Massachusetts, that has one of the highest rates of income inequality, and that's increased over the last 2 decades. So we are very concerned about that, and we want to look at each state system and ask ourselves, is it meeting people's needs? So this includes healthcare. Are we meeting people's healthcare needs in the state? And a lot of people would answer no. Are we meeting people's housing needs? Boston, for example, is the 4th most expensive city to live in the nation. Sometimes people have to pay 1/2 of their income for rent. So we're not meeting people's needs in housing. We don't have a train that connects Worcester with Western Massachusetts. People out in Pittsfield, it's very difficult for them to get to Boston, the state capital. We need to invest in ourselves, and that means better public transportation, a high-speed train connecting the Boston area with Western Massachusetts so that people have more options for employment, and we have fewer cars on the road that contribute to global warming and climate change. So we need radical change of all state systems. We need to look at each system, and as auditor, I would look at the system and ask the question, are we meeting people's needs? Because the auditor is not required to only do financial audits. Financial audits are important, but we also have to audit other things, like income equality. Can we get closer to that? And happiness. Are people happy in the state? That's important too.
We'll come back to income inequality.
Okay.
So quickly, to address one of the things you said about major parties, and we prefer the term old terms, but major party actually is a legal definition in Massachusetts, and there are 3 major parties: the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Libertarians, which means that to get on the ballot, I had to go out and I could only gather signatures for myself, and I could only gather them from unenrolled voters and other Libertarians. That being said, we were still the first party to qualify to be on the ballot. Actually, in any race, I was qualified and certified before Charlie Baker was. So, Libertarians, we only stand for 2 things. Number 1, you own yourself. Okay? You completely control your body. You control what goes into it. You control all the rights of your body, including the reproductive rights. Number 2, don't use force against other people. So, as auditor, when I talk about auditing government spending, I recognize the fact that all the money that has been collected in the state has been collected by force. And if you don't think your taxes are collected by force, try not paying them and see what happens. Now, Libertarians want good schools, we want good roads, we want libraries, we want public works. However, we refuse to violate our tenet of nonviolence to achieve these purposes. If I think we need a new road, I'm going to work to try to get everybody to help me to support that road. But I'm not going to tell you at the point of a gun, you have to contribute to help us build this road. Another reason why Libertarians are particularly qualified to be auditors of the state, is that we specifically believe that the role of government is exactly the letter that it is defined, and no more. We oppose government overreach. The current auditor, as an example, has requested, in fact she's filed legislation to allow her to audit all of our personal tax returns. Why? She wants to use big data to spy on us. I reject that notion. That is not what the auditor is supposed to do. She should be using the data that the government's already collecting to spy on the government, to find these payroll scandals that are happening. So, as a libertarian, dedicated to the idea that government should be as small as possible, we should be very careful of the fact that all the money that is collected by force. So as much as I dislike that, I can't change the fact that taxes are collected. Auditor can't do that. I'm going to make sure that any money that is taken from the people of the Commonwealth by force is being spent properly and not being wasted. And finally, I'm going to make sure that there is no overreach in my office. I'm going to make sure that I follow the letter of the law. I'm going to audit every state agency once every 3 years, and I'm going to make sure that the people are aware of what's going on.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, if you do have a question from the audience for either of the candidates at any point, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll keep that in mind. So I wanted to go back to something you said, Jed, about income inequality, and also to talk broadly about what's been happening on the federal level with the tax cuts that have happened this year through the Trump administration. What is the response of your candidacy to the tax cuts that have happened over the current calendar year?
So it's really not the purvey of the auditor, but to briefly talk about income inequality, we find that in general, most of the worst cases of income inequality that have happened have been a result of direct government intervention. And I'll give you one quick example. In 2008, when the stock market crashed, Barack Obama and John McCain came back and worked together with George Bush, and they came up with the TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, and then followed it up with quantitative easing, where they started buying stock at $48 billion a year. And they lowered the interest rates to essentially zero for businesses to borrow money directly from the government. So what happened at that point in time was the government starts buying back stock, which means stock prices start going up. The companies are getting zero interest loans, and so they start buying back their own stock as well, which means that they become wealthier, their stock prices go up, and they get their own stock back. So at the end of this, and we've seen how the stock market's at about $25,000, 3 times as high as it was 10 years ago. Those companies didn't become more valuable. The currency was devalued. What happened was the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. And it was a transfer from the people who had money in their savings account to the people who owned stock. And it was facilitated by the government. The government shouldn't be doing that. The government shouldn't be picking winners and losers in these cases. And fundamentally, the government should not be stealing through numerical tricks, through printing money out of people's savings accounts.
I definitely agree with Dan regarding the TARP, Troubled Assets Relief Program. I'm opposed to that. But one thing Dan did not mention was Donald Trump's recent reduction in business taxes. Dan said he views taxes as being taken by force, and I don't share that view. The libertarian position here is a bit contradictory because on one hand, they're against force, which I completely agree with. I support the idea of the non-aggression principle. But on the other hand, they're saying, well, we need tax money for some things. Given that we never get 100% agreement of the entire population, he's saying that, well, you know, we do need taxes somewhat, but they're also bad. Well, you can respond. Also, we do need to address income inequality in the state. In fact, it's gotten worse in Massachusetts. The highest top 1% of income earners have seen their income rise by 341% between 1979 and 2014. That's 4 times, and the rate is higher than any other state. And I do not believe in trickle-down economics. I do not think reducing the business tax rate benefits average everyday people. What it does instead, it might give a short-term boost to the economy because you might see in the short term stock prices going up, but that wealth does not trickle down to your average working person. So I do not support Donald Trump's tax cut, although I would support lowering taxes on the poorest people because they need that money to meet their basic needs like housing, clothing, and food.
So,
If I could rebut a little bit.
yeah, will you speak to, is the Libertarian Party contradictory on this?
I don't think so. Fundamentally, our issue is that we oppose all taxes, period. Now, specifically as to the idea of a corporate tax, there's a wonderful article by NPR, which most people would agree is not a right-wing organization, where they talk about the 5 policies that economists agree upon. One of them is legalizing cannabis, but another one is getting rid of the corporate income tax entirely. Because what happens if a corporation has more money? Chances are pretty good. A lot of them are going to pay their executives more. You know what? That's actually good because it means they're going to pay more taxes. Because the highest level income tax is higher than the corporate income tax. They might invest in the company. That's good for us as well. And they might hire more people. But those are the only 3 things they can do with the money. That's it. So what are the consequences that we're talking about if we get rid of the corporate income tax? Corporations have more money. Businesses have more money. Okay, it's not just the corporate income tax, right? We're talking about, your local carpenter as well, who pays taxes if he's, incorporated to protect himself. So when we're talking about this, what happens if a person who has a business has more money? There's a libertarian philosophy called the first three are free. It's invented by a man named Carl Person. He said there are 20 million corporations in the United States that have one employee, that there's just one person incorporated by themselves. If each one of those companies could hire one person, that puts 6 million people back to work, okay? In this environment today, that puts such upward pressure on wages because 6 million people lowers the unemployment rate enormously. It's an easy way, and in order to do that, the easiest way to facilitate it is to say, no to paperwork. You want to hire one employee. The first 3 employees is what we say, the first 3 are free. First 3, no paperwork. You just write them a paycheck. You don't have to do anything else, okay? You don't have to provide them with health insurance, you don't have to pay payroll tax, all that stuff. You're right, that's not the optimal possible position. However, it puts people back to work. We don't have to talk about raising minimum wage if suddenly our unemployment rate was around 2%, which is what it would be if 6 million people went back to work.
So I'll take it back here, and we have a question from the audience, and then we're going to get back to talking about the position of auditor itself. But go ahead with your question.
You offer 3 options when a corporation has more money. My understanding of what has happened most recently is the 4th option that the corporation did a whole lot of stock buyback, which benefited no one except the wealthier people.
Who then ended up having to pay taxes on it at a much higher rate than the corporate income tax.
So that comes under paying executives more.
Paying executives more, I mean, we don't like that idea because we don't like the idea of executives, but it means more money paid in taxes. We should not measure the good that we do by the money that we spend, but by the outcome that we achieve. If the outcome that we achieve is more money paid in taxes, isn't that what you want?
I want to give Jed a chance to respond to the same question.
So you're seeing one difference here between the Libertarian Party and the Green Rainbow Party. Generally, we don't believe in the idea that the ends justify the means. We believe that the means are important as well. So we look at the structure of corporations, and the way that corporations are generally structured in the United States is all profit goes back to the shareholders. It's not reinvested in the workers. It does not go back to the workers' families or their communities. It goes back to the rich, the people wealthy enough to own stock in that company. So we want to see change in the way businesses are structured. We want to see more community-based businesses, more collectives that are owned by the workers, where the profit from that business goes back to the communities where the workers live. That way we can ensure that our businesses really are putting the needs of people first over the needs of stockholders.
Thank you. We're going to, that's one more question, then we'll go back to audience questions. But I want to get back to the position of the auditor because we can talk all day about our political philosophies, but then it comes down to doing hard work. And so I'd like each of you to think about one thing that, as auditor, a tangible step that you could take that would move the state of Massachusetts in the direction that you've been talking about. And we'll start with Jeff.
Well, one thing that the auditor is responsible for under law is to look at unfunded mandates. What unfunded mandates are, basically when the legislature passes a law that says cities and towns are required to do certain things, but does not provide the money to do so. So one major example of that going on right now is in education. The legislature has passed laws requiring certain funding and for special education and other scholastic needs, but they don't give the money, cities and towns, the money to do that. So the government itself and also other agencies that review government policy have found that there's an unfunded mandate in education be somewhere between $1 and $2.6 billion. So this means schools are out $1 to $2.6 billion to meet their own requirements. So as auditor, I would eliminate all unfunded mandates, and I hope Dan would agree with me on this. I know Larry Sharp, who's the Libertarian candidate for governor of New York, has also talked about this issue. He said he would get rid of unfunded mandates entirely because it puts the burden on cities and towns whose local governments already hold far less political power, and just says, deal with this. Well, what are cities and towns supposed to do? Their arms are already tied behind their backs by things like Proposition 2.5 that limit them from raising the funds. So the result of these unfunded mandates are that cities and towns that are in poorer areas can have lower quality schools than cities and towns in richer areas. And I feel that that is wrong. It's ethically wrong, and it needs to change.
One clarifying question. That's $1.2 billion just in the state of Massachusetts.
Yes, that's just in Massachusetts alone.
Great. So we'll go to you, Dan. What is one tangible step you can take as auditor?
So, as Jed pointed out, I do agree that unfunded mandates are a bad thing. However, the auditor has absolutely no ability to change that. The mandates come from the legislature. The one thing that I would ask is that every time a mandate is an unfunded, any mandate is proposed, that the auditor do a complete analysis like the OMB does in Washington as to what the cost would be, so that people could be aware. The case in point, the school choice one that's happening right now, where if you want to, you can have your children go to school in another school district, and your school district ends up having to pay that school district. That costs a tremendous amount of money. As a former teacher, I hear from my colleagues. It would be nice if, before they had passed that, the legislature had said, oh yeah, this is going to cost a tremendous amount of money to these school districts. As to me personally, what I can do, I am a computer scientist. Specifically, I have skills at analyzing data and transforming data and measuring the efficacy of actions. Computers can do this right now. And the state is collecting this money. The state has a system called the see-through system, C-THRU. The controller enters every time a check is cut, anytime any money comes in. The auditor has access to that information. We could start taking advantage of that and looking at it and say, every time somebody gets paid, let's report what happened. Every time an agency cuts a check, let's report what happened. Instead of what's happening right now, where they audit at the end of the year, and the auditor tells her friends, guess what, I'm coming in to audit you in 3 weeks, get your books in order. No, let's get all the information as it happens, real time. If they want to issue a correction, issue a correction. But we deserve to know what's happening right now. That information is available. Technology makes it so that we can process it right away, make the people available. And the last thing I would say is that there's a technology that's used now called business rules, where essentially you make rules about data, and if the data doesn't line up right, then you get alerts about it. If a state trooper who is carrying a gun and can shoot people and driving a car in a high-speed pursuit works 80 hours in a week, we ought to be alarmed. If they work 160 hours in 2 weeks, we ought to be very alarmed. If it works 240 hours, we ought to send in the Inspector General.
Well, thank you. There's a lot there in what both candidates have said, but I want to go to another audience question. The person in green there.
Yes, recently there was a big debate between the governor and I believe Suzanne Bump about the number of people that have passed away in Massachusetts and the families receiving benefits still. Are you aware of that debate? And what do you think about what would you do to prevent deceased people, families of deceased people still receive the benefits that the auditor should have been aware of? She said one figure and the governor was saying another.
And Suzanne Bump being the current auditor, Democratic.
So we issued a press release about this just to clarify exactly what happened. The auditor, Suzanne Bump, claimed that there were 1,900 people who were dead according to the Social Security Master Death List, who had been issued driver's licenses after their death. Now, she claimed that at a Jay Gonzalez fundraiser event. Jay Gonzalez is the Democratic candidate for governor. So she created a scandal, criticized the governor, and brought some fame to her preferred candidate. The governor fired back, said, first of all, the techniques that are in place right now for validating against the master death list were put in place by Deval Patrick, not by Charlie Baker. Secondly, the R&B disputes the number. It says that no, these people actually aren't dead right now. And so the auditor didn't say anything, and I issued a press release. I said, if you're making this claim, if you're willing to disparage the government, please tell us the name of one person who is dead who was issued a driver's license, and then we can look it up. And she responded that she couldn't release that because of privacy issues. To which I replied, the dead have no right to privacy. So if your claim is true, you ought to be able to find one name out of the 1,900 people that you claim are dead. The problem with the auditor's office right now, this is something that both Jed and I would address, is that she's using her power for political gain, and that is terrible.
Thank you for clarifying that question.
And I would definitely agree with Dan on this. It's a pattern of behavior that we've seen many times before with Suzanne Bump. She uses the office to play political games. So another example of what we're talking about that goes back further behind, before the RMV issue came up to the forefront, was her DCF audit. And Suzanne Bump audited the DCF twice in 8 years. She's technically supposed to do it every 3 years, but since she hasn't audited some agencies at all, well, that's better than your average agency. The first audit really didn't find anything wrong. The second audit, she investigated child abuse incidents, and she found that half of them were not being reported. Now, I applaud her for that. She did one audit that's not a financial audit. She looked at child abuse, and I would do a number of other non-financial audits. But one thing I'd like to note about that, in her first audit of the DCF, she didn't look at child abuse at all. And that wasn't a priority because her second audit of the DCF, she did for political purposes. In fact, she was accused of using the audit as a political football, which is sort of a funny phrase, but basically it means she wasn't accepting responsibility for the DCF problem. She was passing those problems to Republican Governor Baker, even though the DCF audit covered a period of time before Baker was in office. So she's using the office of auditor not to improve the conditions and needs of the people of Massachusetts. She's using it to play political games.
A quick math thing, Jed's 100% right. That audit covered a 2-year period during which Deval Patrick was governor for 360 days and Charlie Baker was governor for 356.
Wow, so using the office for political gain, but you're both running on a party platform, so how is that going to be different when you're in office? We'll start with Jeff.
Well, currently, the Green Rainbow Party does not have any elected officials at the state level. We do have some locally elected officials, Joyce Palmer Fortune here in Whately, and we have someone on the Amherst Town Council. So because we really don't have anybody as a state representative or in the state house, I don't feel that we'd be even able to play political games. If I were elected, I would be the only Green Rainbow candidate in statewide office. So I would be able to play that role as an independent candidate. And basically, I agree with Dan, the referee should not be wearing the jersey of one of the teams. So I'd be wearing my own green jersey, independent from the red and the blue jerseys that we see on Beacon Hill. I would also work together with everyone on Beacon Hill. I would treat Democrats and Republicans the same. Anyone who would like to work with me, I know the auditor can't propose legislation. We can make recommendations, and we can certainly work together with people across the aisle or on both sides of the aisle, so to speak.
So in terms of how the party platform would affect us, I went to lpmass.org. I know as rude as it is to see me on the phone, but I wanted to make sure that I got it exactly right. I will read to you the party platform of the Libertarian Party of Massachusetts. Number 1, self-ownership. You own yourself. To deny this implies that someone else could possibly own you. This means that you should have final say as to what happens to your body. Also, because you own yourself entirely, you're entitled to all the products of your labor. No person or government can have a preemptive claim to anything you earn. Number 2, non-aggression. We believe that the initiation of force or fraud as a means of achieving personal, political, or social goals is never justified. The use of force against another person in an aggressive manner is always wrong. Force is only justified in self-defense, in the defense of one's life, liberty, or property. So that's it. That's the platform that I am bringing to Beacon Hill. It says nothing about whether or not I think that government should do this, government should do that, any of those things. Because frankly, whenever you ask me if I think government should do something, I temper that with the idea that that money that government is going to do it with has been collected by force. Now, you can find lots of examples of things that we have done voluntarily, and that's awesome. So in Beverly, we had a library that we built that was voluntary. People got together, forgetting the name, Mitt Romney's Lieutenant Governor, Kerry Healy, organized a group. She said, you know, we want to build a new library in Beverly. People came in, they donated, a lot of fundraising, took about 3 years, built an amazing library. It's possible to do things like that. The difference is that we have to change the way that we want to think about it. For the auditor, all I can do, very limited, okay, it's just Section 12 of the law, Section 12 of Massachusetts General Law that specifies what the powers of the auditor are. The auditor can require every state agency to produce records of their financial transactions in whatever format the auditor chooses, as frequently as the auditor wishes. That's it. Now you can be invited in to do other audits, but in terms of what you can initialize on your own, that's it. I would stick to that very specific criteria.
Quick rebuttal, and then we'll go to another audience question.
So again, the libertarian position, unless you're taking a hardcore anarcho-capitalist position, is contradictory because it's saying all taxation is by force, but we need some taxes to do, you know, some things, you know, at least we do need the police. And I would say, I view it differently. I view it in terms of a social contract, and that the government, it really is about helping people in general and helping society. It's not every man for himself. The libertarian position basically results in sort of a social Darwinist type position of survival of the fittest. And that might work out great for some people. Some people are go-getters, try to make as much money as they can, but other people really don't care about that. Other people just want to work together, they want to support their community, they want to give something back to society. So we have to have a government that ensures the needs of those people are met, as well as the needs of people who want to go out and make a lot of money. And I'm a strong supporter of volunteerism. In fact, Green Rainbow Party consists of mostly volunteers, but I know that volunteerism alone doesn't get things done. We also need to pay people to do good things and to help other people who can't do them, such as disabled people, the elderly, and children.
So, I could not disagree more strongly. Okay, fundamentally, libertarianism would describe our political philosophy as the love and trust of your neighbor. And that means that if you love and you trust your neighbor, you accept the fact that sometimes they are going to do bad things for themselves. People are going to make bad decisions. And we should be there to help them out. Okay? We sit in a church, right? Tithing is probably the original form of taxation, where people were voluntarily asked to contribute 10% of their income towards a greater good. Libertarians try to act that. We try to live that. We try to give as much as we can to the causes that we believe actually make a difference. I, for one, I believe Feeding America has been my #1 cause since before I discovered I was a libertarian. It's ridiculous that 1 out of 5 children in the United States is food insecure. That kind of voluntarism, though, and I'll wrap it up in 20 seconds, that kind of voluntarism is critical because when you say, I am authorized to force you to help me with this one project, that's what you've enabled Donald Trump to do. They won the election. So you're saying that their 51% gets to tell me that transgender people can't go to a bathroom? Do they get to make a law about that? No.
All right, so again, a lot here, and I want to just encourage the candidates to, since we are short on time, just try to keep responses close to the position at hand here. We had a question from the person in blue back there.
So my question, it relates to visibility. I don't think there are very many people right now that know that there's such a thing as the Massachusetts State Auditor. And so how are you going to, there's a lot of value in the work, right? So when in office, how would you get awareness of the position and the work that you're doing into the 24-hour news cycle?
Excellent question, thank you. And yeah, visibility, really interesting and a hot topic. We'll start with Dan this time, I think.
So part of it comes right now. So in our internal polling, 50% of the people that we contact don't know that there is an auditor's race, and that's a real problem. My numbers, I'm actually running strongest in terms of name recognition of all the candidates, even ahead of Suzanne Bump. However, the 50% of the people who don't know that there's a candidate are going to vote the ticket. And that means that mathematically the Democrats are going to win. So, in the office, one of the things I talk about all the time, all the information, all the books, online, all the time. Business rules to start alerting people whenever there's data that says there's a problem going on here. So, the Steamship Authority had 587 ships break down, trips canceled, just between January and May of this year. I said, you know what, let me look at the audit and see if I can see what's going on there. You know, maybe we're not paying the mechanics enough because, you know, mechanics get paid quite a bit. Maybe that's something that's going on. And so I went and I tried to look at payroll. It wasn't there. Payroll had not been submitted in 8 years for the Steamship Authority. And as it turns out, the auditor actually had audited the Steamship Authority last year. She audited parking lot receipts and tickets for the trips. But somehow, in doing that audit, she managed to not find out that they weren't submitting payroll. Okay? I'm going to have business rules in place that says, look, at the beginning of the year, as it turns out, 19 of the 35 quasi-state agencies didn't submit payroll. Why did that happen? Because they're being run by friends of the auditor. It's politically awkward to say, oh yeah, you guys haven't submitted payroll. Fundamentally, if we put computers in charge of auditing, that sort of information will show up. We send out an email to the Globe, to the Herald. Guess who didn't turn in their books again? That's how we increase visibility.
Well, Dan, you're going to put systems in place that put you out of your job.
That is actually my goal. That is my goal.
I completely agree with Dan regarding these quasi-government agencies, and he's right. About half of the quasi-government agencies did not, according to a 2010 law, put their financial records online as required by that law. And I'm opposed to these quasi-government agencies altogether. I'm opposed to the idea of private-public partnerships, which is a libertarian, in some circles, a libertarian idea, working together with private agencies to do things. I don't believe in that. I believe that the government should do its job. And I would make sure good people are in that position. But to address your question, I would not try to get publicity for the office. In fact, I think what the current auditor is doing right now is she's spending too much time getting publicity by going to these big money ribbon cutting events and organizations for rich people. I look at her schedule and every day she's giving a speech, either a campaign speech or, you know, some pat you on the back. I don't see how she has time to do her job. What I would do instead is I would take a community-based approach, which means I would go to political demonstrations. I would go to community events, especially in low SES areas. I would go out on the street and talk to homeless people, give them food. I know there's friends online in the Green Rainbow Party who do that on a daily basis. So I would talk to working people. I would talk to the little guy, and when I start doing that, the coverage will come to me instead of going out trying to find the ritziest, most expensive event I can speak at, as the current auditor does.
Thank you both. So we are getting to the end of the debate, and hopefully these two candidates will stick around. If you have any more questions, you can ask them one-on-one. But for closing statements, the position is ultimately about having integrity, and that's what the job of the auditor is to have integrity where other areas of the government may not. So in your closing statements, I'm going to ask you to address what is it about your candidacy and your background that you feel you have the integrity to do the job well and to earn the vote of the folks in the room and everyone else in the state of Massachusetts. And I think we start with Jeff this time.
So I come to this not from a background as a lawyer or a background as a big businessman. I come into this as a teacher. So I'm more familiar working with children and teaching, which involves really helping people, giving them opportunity, trying to allow them to see the love of learning, critical thinking. So I bring that to my job as auditor, and I would put the emphasis on basically the little guy, the people who are not benefiting from the system, the people who don't have stocks, the people who maybe rely on that check from the government in order to survive. And I feel I definitely have more integrity than most of the politicians on Beacon Hill, because we see time and time again, we see nepotism, we see corruption, we see people taking bribes, and we see contributions to their campaigns from lobbyists and big corporate interests. In my campaign and the other Green Rainbow campaigns, we've only received contributions from individuals like you. We have not received any contributions from corporations or lobbyists. So I think that speaks a lot for my integrity, and I look forward to receiving your vote for auditor on November 6th.
Talk a little bit about some of my professional background that deals with my integrity. So for the last 8 years, I worked for a company called ESPED. If you know a teacher in the state of Massachusetts, they've used ESPED. It stands for Electronic Special Education. We were the 800-pound gorilla of online IEPs, 504s, if you're familiar with special education. Hello. I think I can fill the room anyway, but fundamentally, when we were doing that data, we were presented with a lot of ethical issues that we saw, especially outside the state of Massachusetts. So Massachusetts has the best special education in the country, by a mile. ESPED was used in other places, and we would come in and we would tell them, what you're doing is wrong, and in many cases, you are actually stealing money from your students. When you claim services that are not justified by the goals that you've written in your IEP, when you are billing for transportation costs that are not justified, you actually are not getting the money back in your school system. The school system is wasting money. So we brought those issues to a lot of places, and these people are our customers. So customers don't like it when you tell them you're doing stuff wrong. But it was important for us because we wanted to make special education better. Prior to that, I worked at Massachusetts General Hospital. I wrote the distance learning program that they use there. But I also was involved in a program called PERKS, which was addressing the fact that in Massachusetts, nurse practitioners are allowed to prescribe medication. There are laws that affect how pharmaceutical companies are allowed to influence doctors into prescribing their medication. Those laws did not affect nurse practitioners. So we wrote a training program where we would teach nurse practitioners, this is what they do. These are the influences that they have. A lot of stuff is very obvious where they say, oh, we're having a convention in Hawaii talking about, Abilify, and we can come out and it's a 2-week convention and 4 hours a day, we'd like you to come do our thing. But sometimes it's a lot more subtle, where they sponsor a trade seminar in the city and they say, oh, we're doing education about this, sponsored by Abilify, and everybody gets to go for free. So trying to make people aware of those things we thought was a big importance of ethics. So fundamentally, and also, I wrote software for a program that began it was a distance learning program for doctors at Mass General talking about transgender health issues, which unfortunately in 2010, we weren't talking about in a realistic way. A lot of doctors prefer to pretend like there was no issue. So we wrote a program for training Mass General to help people understand that there are questions that doctors and any healthcare provider needs to ask, and it doesn't matter what the patient looks like. So those are issues of ethics that I have in my background, sort of integrity that I want to bring. This job would be a straight up pay cut for me. I'm willing to do that because I don't believe in the idea of civic leadership. I don't believe that people are sheep. They don't believe they need to be led. I believe that we need to elect public servants. I'm willing to serve. We talk about the fact that I put myself out of the job. If I do it right, I do want to do that. But 100%, I'm committing, I will only serve 2 terms because I don't believe the auditor should serve longer than that. The current auditor has been in office for 2 terms. She's seeking a 3rd term. The Democrats have held the auditor's office since 1931. I've been campaigning for a year. I have yet to be at an event where I can find somebody say, can anybody raise their hand if they were born when there was an auditor who wasn't a Democrat? So, it is definitely time for a change in our system. It's time for us to bring integrity or ethics back there. I'm also going to ask for your vote. For those of you who haven't voted early already, we have an opportunity. I'm currently polling 2nd right now. I am knocking on the door. It is important that we get every vote that we can for this campaign. Because if we can push the Democrat out here, if we elect one more Republican, one more Democrat, it doesn't make a difference. But if we elect a Libertarian, if we elect a third-party candidate in Massachusetts, then Revolution 2.0 starts here. Power to the people.
Wow, well, thank you everyone for coming out again, and here we've heard from two candidates, and there is also Suzanne Bump is running again, and there is also a Republican candidate, but just to know that whatever the turnout of the election, we have two great candidates here that you can vote for, and hopefully